Happy Wednesday, and welcome to another homebound, physically distant edition of BC Poly Hot Stove. I am Maclean K. I am the editor-in-chief of this mighty website, The Orca. I'm joining you live from, this is my kitchen table, and joining me live from, not so nearby Langley.
Yeah, joining you live from my wife's office. It's home office. It's Jordan Maitman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. And as always, our podcast is best enjoyed while being socially distant from anyone.
That's been true the whole time.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Changed at all.
Not at all, not at all.
Oh, there were not people. I mean, they should have been doing this, but there were very few BC Poly Hot Stove parties that I was aware of. That's none, true. But few.
Maybe we can somehow seed that into the new world post-COVID. Like everyone gathers together around their Google Play device and their Google Home device, and then they listen to us together.
Yeah. And speaking of parties, now I don't know if you're like me, but we've talked about this before. I have found the daily Dr. Bonnie Henry briefings, through no fault of hers or anyone else's, kind of they're tough to get through for me, because I find this whole thing, I find it depressing, to be honest. And so when we have the big detailed briefings where we do the, as we did last Friday, where we receive a super embargoed PowerPoint presentation and detailed numbers, I was looking forward to that with dread. I was really not looking forward to seeing, the numbers are, you're literally looking at numbers of like their deaths. And it's depressing. I find it so. But then Friday came, and it's starting to look almost hopeful. We're a long ways out, and we have to keep doing what we're doing, but the curve is flattening. I think it was today, was it the fourth day in a row where we've had under 30 new cases? That's a landmark. When you compare that, yesterday Ontario had 551 new cases in 24 hours. So it's last Friday, it was kind of the first time I started thinking, it's we're not there yet, but maybe we can see around the edge of the horizon.
Yeah. Well, you're right. There is a certain solemn liturgy to what Bonnie Henry and Henry-Dix do every day.
Yeah.
It's the same time every day. It's the same podium every day. It's Henry-Dix coming out and, thanking the Songhees and the Esquimalt people. It's him, it's very much like church.
Yeah.
You have these set things, and then introducing the provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, and then she comes up and runs you through the new cases, and then the new cases by jurisdiction and the deaths, and they're very solemn about the deaths. And then, Henry-Dix comes back and, again, adds his condolences for the deaths. There is this kind of almost liturgical pattern now, and it's bound to happen. They've done, of course, 50 of these things now, like 60 of these briefings.
And I don't know how else they would do them either, but they have set into our formula. You're right about that.
Totally. And then there's the questions, and the media are kind of all over the map. And some days, much like the rest of us, some days individual reporters have good days, where they're like, working on a story that really interests them and maybe doesn't depress them terribly. And so they have a good question or an upbeat question. And then they have days where they're depressed, where they're upset, and it gets just I've noticed a little tinge of hostility almost on the phone lines from time to time, where they kind of, and not to pick on her, because I think she's an excellent reporter. Marcella Bernardo had one last week, and it was exasperation with people disobeying physical distancing. And exasperation is probably putting it lightly. Like, it was almost like, why don't you lock these bums up, throw them in jail?
Yeah.
And,
no, you're not exaggerating. She was very terse and direct on that day.
And none of us know what's going on in anyone else's head or life or what they've seen and all of that. And to their credit, Dix and Henry have not had those generally hostile days. I don't think Bonnie Henry has a hostile bone in her body, so that helps there. I know Dix does. We've seen it, but he's done a good job bottling it up. And so you see it. You've seen some exasperation from the premier from time to time, although he's very much hidden away. I found his. I laughed at his punting TransLink to the feds. Like, that is just classic political deflection. Why would the feds bail out TransLink? It's a provincially appointed transit authority. You have a minister responsible for TransLink, and you want to bail out from Ottawa? Like, that was just classic political deflection. But for me, I found that almost comforting, Maclean, because I was like, classic political deflection. This is something I recognize. Okay, we're going to be okay. We can still blame Ottawa for everything.
And I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but I can tell you from experience, because we call in, by we I mean the reporters, to these daily briefings, and we sit through and listen to, Henry-Dix and then Bonnie Henry and then Henry-Dix again, and then the questions, and then it's extremely rare to get a question in if you're not Vaughn Palmer or Richard Zussman, and so you might get one a week, less probably, and when you're sitting and listening for 45 minutes, there's an excellent chance that either A, you won't get your question asked, or the B, someone else will. So I know there's been a few times, and I'm not going to name any names because we've talked about it offline, but like there's been a few times where reporters have been caught with their kind of pants down, where they've hit *1 because you have no choice at the beginning. If you want a question, you either do it right at the beginning or it's not happening no matter what. And then either the question gets asked and answered, or someone else and then so they have no idea what to do when they come on the line.
Right. So then they're yelling at they can't even yell in the newsroom because they're not in the newsroom. But normally you'd yell at the other reporters, "Anyone working on a story? They need a quote from Dix for," right? You'd be panicking trying to get it, but no one's working in that environment anymore. So
and the other thing that's interesting, and this is a very inside baseball, but I think they've gone easy on the bigger outlets, and for a good reason, on the one question per reporter thing, because if, let's say, Richard Zussman from Global, what he'll have is he'll be working on a story, and then two other people from Global bureaus will be working on stories, and instead of 3 questions from Global, which would annoy everyone, I think, they'll have Richard say, I need this, this, and this. And he's very good at asking it quickly. But we see that almost every day, not from him, but from the bigger organizations. But there's a reason for that. If you're a smaller base reporter, if it wasn't done that way, then you'd be having 6 different CBC reporters calling in, and that's not going to make anything better.
No, exactly. The question I found most interesting this week, and it was because I was on a Langley Minor Hockey Association executive call last night, was from Patrick Johnson from the province.
Yes.
Who finally got a sports question in. And this is something, look, like I've got kids right now. I've got a 10-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. She was supposed to be playing her 4th year of softball, probably her last. He was supposed to be in his 2nd year of baseball. He was supposed to be in spring 3-on-3 hockey. So the question is, like, when do you restart? And on Minor Hockey Executive, we're the 2nd largest association in the province. We had 1,100 kids last year in minor hockey whose season ended 2 weeks early, and that's obviously the right call. I'm not quibbling with that, but like, how do you plan for the fall? How do you do a socially distant hockey? So to hear Patrick Johnson ask that question was great, and it was a glimmer of hope, which flied in the face of a lot of what a certain senior political correspondent for Global BC has been tweeting about sports. Keith is very much a sports, or Keith is very much a negative Nelly when it comes to kids sports ever reopening this year.
Yes.
But Dr. Henry sounded like she was open to, like, hey, put some restrictions together and let me look at them. I'm willing to look at them, which is an interesting step forward.
I really respect that, in that even if the answer is going to be no, a dismissive no off the bat doesn't help anybody. No. She is at the very least signaling, I'm prepared to look at your plan, and maybe help you work with it to make it better. But it's so much better than no, absolutely not. And I think that's part of the reason that you are seeing, there are going to be some people that object to it, I'm about to say, but you're seeing better compliance here in BC than elsewhere, because I think that there is a recognition that the authorities are at least being reasonable. No one's being fined for, I don't want to get into what we talked about last week, but no one's being fined for talking to their neighbors or having driveway parties. I mean, I do think that the province has overreached, and I don't mean the provincial government, by closing too many parks where people could socially distant enjoy themselves outside. But, compared to what's going on in Ontario right now, I am not going to complain.
No, exactly. Or Michigan, for example. Michigan shut down. Home Depot is allowed to open but not sell seeds. Like, weird things. Like, you're going, what does that matter? It'll be interesting to see how they start to roll this out. They're going to get more and more pressure every day as the states open up, as other parts of the country open up. I mean, Saskatchewan came forward with a plan for their reopening. They're going to have to start addressing this. But, for us, in the hockey world, okay, well, we started brainstorming, right? Like, what could hockey look like? Minor hockey, how do you do it? So we'll have some ideas maybe to put forward to the provincial health officer at the right time. So yeah, it's this has been hard. You know, I wrote in my piece for the Orca this week about how our brains are being rewired, and there's going to be there's anxiety now, but it's going to be just as much anxiety when we get out, because we'll be hypersensitive to our 6-foot bubble. We'll be very sensitive to what businesses are doing. You know, people led the way. Like before the quarantine became official, people were already self-isolating, a big chunk of them. So yeah, I'm curious. I'm not curious. I wish I didn't have to find out, but the mental health ramifications of this and how long it takes us to feel safe out and about in the world.
And I mean, it was a great piece. I encourage, if you're listening, to read it. You're right. And I think it's going to be longer than most people think. And I think there's going to be a reluctance to be the first to do a number of things. It's going to be hard. I use the analogy of being the first kid to pass in your test, because there's some anxiety that comes with that. You know, how confident do I really feel about having gotten all this right, or some of it right? You know, it's one thing to venture to the grocery store. It's probably going to be another thing after that to go venture to a restaurant if they've got some modified restrictions with fewer people in it. But when are you going to be ready to go to a concert? When are you going to be ready to go see the Canucks play? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. And I'm somebody who is very much looking forward to football season. And now I'm kind of thinking it's probably not going to happen. Well, the season at all. But I mean, even if they are, I don't see us going.
No, I don't see it either. And I don't see how the CFL happens without. It's too much of a gate-driven league to go, so they're going to lose a whole year. This is society changing. You know, the word unprecedented got used a lot at the beginning. We don't use it as much anymore because after 6 weeks in isolation, we feel very precedented. But you know, by the way, that's a allergy cough, not a. I feel like I have to state that when I cough.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But you know, we do not know the long-term ramifications societally. And what I like now is that people are starting to think about it. And, you know, the States are, I wouldn't want to live in the States, but God bless the States for being a laboratory of democracy, as they like to talk to themselves. And they're going to test this out 50 different ways, and we can sit back and wait a couple weeks behind them and see which one of the 50 worked and which ones of the 50 didn't. And, you know, I also think, we have to really discern through the media and the partisan lenses that we in Canada often use when we look at the States.
Yeah.
Like Jacksonville, Florida was getting just like stuffing kicked out of them for reopening beaches. But you actually look closer at it, and the beaches were reopened for 4 hours a day. If people were socially distant, no tourists. And you're like, wow, okay, that's kind of what I want for the park across the street, right? Like,
yeah,
it doesn't have a beautiful beach, but, you know, there's no reason why that can't happen. And so we just got to be patient and wait and see. At the same time, you know, now is the time for businesses, especially consumer-facing ones, to rethink their model, take the lessons they've learned from some of these restaurants who have limped through with takeout, the grocery stores, the places that had to keep going, and start applying them now. So, you know, if you own a consumer-facing retail shop, for example, and you haven't, you know, found your plexiglass yet for you to put up between your till and your customers, get out there. You might as well find it, because it's, you know, they're not going to relax it that much. Those are precisely the kind of precautions you're going to have to take.
And the businesses that are open now, you mentioned the grocery stores. My favorite ice cream joint, just a couple blocks from here, is moved to a walk-by window, like a drive-through, not a drive-through, but a walk-through window model only. Those businesses that have tried to stay open, they're going to have a head start, because they have had to do all that stuff. It's going to be really hard for the new restaurant that hasn't opened yet, for, you know, malls, which are going to be starting from scratch whenever this does happen. The thing that's going to be a little frightening is it's not going to be uniform. There'll be some that do it well, and there'll be some that won't. And, you know, the only way you're going to find out is by going there.
Well, you know, I've thought about malls a lot because our office is attached to Metrotown Mall. So, you know, we walk through it quite a bit, and, you know, we use the food court and the services. Like, I'm a regular Metrotown Mall person. And it will be fascinating to see. Like, before the quarantine, we'd already seen Burnaby being a heavily populated Chinese area. We'd already seen a drop in customers there. Like, And to their credit, a lot of Chinese Canadians were ahead of the curve on this. Number one, because they'd had experience with SARS, and number two, they didn't trust the People's Republic to be telling the truth about these, and they would be getting texts and WhatsApps from friends back home or family back home saying this is big, and so they were self-isolating before. Ian James Young, South China Morning Post, who I don't generally agree much with, does have some fascinating analysis of this and is worth tracking down if you want to know more about that phenomenon. But Metrotown had already seen a drop in customers. I wonder, the big stores like the Apples, the Lululemons, they can afford to stay closed longer. It's the mom and pop stores that will feel the most pressure to reopen first. They will also be the ones with the least cash flow equipped to deal with these changes. Yeah. So how will that work? How long until you can actually, if you take out 2/3 of the tables in the food court and space out tables, you still got to have hand washing stations out in the food court. So that's going to be a constant reminder. Yeah. How many of those little restaurants even can reopen? How many have gone out of business? These are the kind of things, you think of some of the old decrepit malls that have more empty storefronts than full ones. Aldergrove Mall for us Langley folks is a good example. And I fear that I don't want Metrotown to be that, because for a mall it was a pretty vibrant place.
Yeah. This is you're gonna laugh when I bring up this. An interesting measure it will be when you, and by you I mean everyone, are comfortable using a public toilet. And guys, I don't mean a urinal, I mean a toilet. Yeah. Right. It's I don't think it's that first week or a couple days after things start to open up. It's going to be that'll be one of those interesting measures.
Yeah, I remember being a little kid in the '80s when AIDS was just starting, and it was a huge afraid thing. Yeah. And someone had read somewhere that it couldn't live outside the body for more than 5 seconds. So my mom would tell me, little 7-year-old Jordan, count to 10 before you sit on the potty.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. And scientifically, there's no basis for that. Let me tell you. But that was the mindset at the time, right? And now I worry, with social media, even worse, right? God only knows what kind of crazy contraptions. The funny thing though is entrepreneurs, God bless them, they find a way. So on my Instagram feed, they had this ad for this new tool, and it attaches to your keychain and essentially has a hook and a little pointer. And the pointer is you can use for screens or for elevator buttons. And the hook you can use to actually hook door handles and open them without touching anything. I was like, you know what, Maclean? I thought to myself, should I buy one just to reward the ingenuity of this? I don't want to be that guy, but that is kind of that takes someone sitting there up at night thinking this thing through and rushing into production, probably in China, God only knows. But I found that pretty fascinating. I want to pass along a little anecdotal stuff from the businesses we work with in construction. Yeah, construction is still going on. It's an essential service. I'd say we're down maybe 15%, 20% at the most as far as workforce. Construction has held its own pretty good. In fact, some construction companies are actively advertising for workers. The vast majority of people who aren't working are people who, for whatever reason, maybe they have a loved one who is immunocompromised or a loved one that's pregnant. So they've kind of self-isolated and taken time off for that. There have been no COVID outbreaks on construction sites. By and large, they're sticking to the parameters put out by Dr. Henry. WorkSafe BC is checking, but checking in a way that is, pardon the pun, constructive, not destructive. They're not being punitive about stuff. They're listen, they're educating. Yeah. And they recognize this is new and they're educating. And that, union, non-union, all of it is really working together well in British Columbia in a way that construction has not worked together well in Ontario, for example, where it's ground to a halt. And it's a real tribute to the people involved. So there's that aspect of it. But then you look at tourism, and it's down 90%. Restaurants, 85%. Someone had a piece, and forgive me the reporter because this is excellent work, but about one block in Kitsilano and something like 1,600 jobs or 160 jobs had been lost on this one block in Kitsilano. All these little small mom and pop restaurants who are now shutting down.
Oh man, I haven't seen that report.
Yeah, I just saw it this morning. I just saw it this morning, but it was interesting, right? They had like the little map and they showed the little, 30 jobs at here and 18 jobs at Burgoo, and like, I read this morning about the Sea to Sky gondola planning to attract locals and socially distancing them, but who's going to have money? Like, who's going to have money to travel inside BC? Who's going to be willing to show up in these small resort communities and get, lashed by the mayor of Tofino and, or whoever. And I'm not sure this is, like, I'd hate to be in a tourism business right now. My heart really goes out to those families.
No, I saw you tweeting about that this morning, and you're right. I don't know what other alternative they have.
Yeah.
Again, you preface this with everything you say about this, but assuming things continue to go well and things start to open up again this summer, I mean, if you were planning a vacation of any sort, you're probably not going to Disneyland. No. You're definitely not flying to Europe. So I guess the right play then is, if you are going to have a vacation, you do consider a place like Tofino, the Gulf Islands, camping in the Similkameen. But I mean, there's only X million British Columbians, and if every single British Columbian takes a vacation in British Columbia this summer, that does not make up for the loss of international and national tourism. But I mean, again, what choice do they have?
Yeah, what choice?
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, they're locked in, and this is where we have to realize that the hope of a V-shaped recovery is gone, because travel and international trade is essentially paused. And it's far more likely that you have that U or that long L kind of tracking back upwards. So it's rough. Like, man, it's easy for me because, I have a good job. I'm safe. My family's safe. We could afford the, our smoke alarm is on the fritz. I can afford to go down to Home Depot and buy one now. It's like, these are not make or break expenditures. But for a lot of people, they are on the edge. It is very tight. Again, back to minor hockey, we talked about, like, how do we defer payments for families who are in need? Like, we don't want kids to be punished not playing hockey just, because of a world calamity that their folks can control. That's not fair, right? And trying to balance all that. And this is why Dixon Henry, in a way, and this sounds amazing and shocking, in a way they're fortunate in that they look at the health, like, they're narrow. They look at the health things. But for John Horgan and Farnworth and Bruce Ralston and Carol James, they have to look at the damage being done across society because of this. Judy Darcy has to look at the mental health issues. Yes, COVID has killed this many people, but what's going on with the mental health issues of British Columbia? What is going to be the long-term effects of that? The opioid crisis. All these different kind of things that have come into play. It's tough. There are no. Remember what we used to say: the best day in government is, or the worst day in government is better than the best day in opposition. I would tell you right now.
Put to the test.
Yeah, this government, there's no good days in government right now. Like, no one is waking up, bounding out of bed, going, "Man, I can't wait to get another day going here." I'm in government. Like, this is a historic, difficult thing, and and they're trying. Like, John Horgan had his BC Arts concert, it had something like 3,000 views. Like, all right, well, okay, he wasn't exactly Nickelback or whoever BC produces. I don't know, Default or any of those bands. But
honestly, I logged in for just a few minutes out of curiosity, and through no fault of the performers, none. I found it hard. It was people in their living rooms, going a cappella with like an acoustic guitar, and it was just like
it wasn't Bocelli on the steps of the Milan Cathedral.
No, and again, I'm not talking about the quality of the performance. I'm just saying for me it was, I wanted an escape, and this was just a constant reminder of the situation we're in. And I want to make that clear, because the person I was watching singing was actually really good, but it was just like I want to pretend that this isn't happening for 15 minutes. Yeah. And it's just a constant reminder that we're here.
Yeah. And that's why the binging on TV has been so powerful, and it's Netflix is up 20 million subscribers or something. Well, it does let you escape, right? Like my wife and I are working through Peaky Blinders. Would we ever have time to watch 5-6 seasons of Peaky Blinders in our normal life? God, no. No, there'd be a Canuck game or the kids games or whatever. There'd always be something else. But, for an hour or two every night, we are back in 1920s Birmingham, and we don't have to think about this friggin' flu or pandemic, not flu, sorry. 1918, the Spanish flu. That's why I'm really into. But we don't have to think about this coronavirus for a few minutes. And you're right, it's different with these concerts. The Bocelli concert on Easter Sunday was a powerful spiritual experience for me. I will say this. And when up till now, I've only had really one memorable Easter, and I was 19 or 20. I was traveling by myself. I was in England. I stayed in the bed of breakfast near Salisbury Cathedral, which was the largest, highest spire in all of England. And that morning I had breakfast in the bed of breakfast, and I came down. We walked down this path by this glittering stream in Maclean. The church bells were ringing and the birds were singing, and it was like, all as well as the world, right? This was a different kind of experience where it was, Bocelli sang 3 songs inside the cathedral, which were okay. I mean, I think they were in Latin or Italian or whatever. And so, you're only catching parts of it. But then he walked outside the cathedral and sang Amazing Grace.
Oh, wow.
A Protestant hymn on the steps of a Catholic cathedral, right? Like in Milan, Italy, or in Milan, and wow. Sings it. And, they cut to these scenes of like a deserted LA, a deserted New York City Times Square, a deserted London, Trafalgar Square. And you're like, it was powerful. It was powerful. And it was powerful because it was rooted in the situation we were in. But then at the same time that night, I watched Captain America with the kids because you just can't live in that.
Yeah.
You just can't live in this day after day after day.
No, it's true. And I mean, the point you're making about how Horgan and basically everyone who's not health authority or health official has to sort of continue to take the wider view. That is not an endorsement of ending everything early. It's just like, they have to think like that.
Yeah.
And the world has been sort of quietly continuing. And I'll give you a very small, somewhat silly example. Recently, the condo where I live, we had to have a tree pulled because the roots had grown down into the piping and was causing consistent leaks into one poor unit on the ground floor. They had 4 floods over the space of 3 months.
Yikes.
Yeah, right. So we had the tree service in, and this is all in the last month. They say, yeah, you're gonna have to pull the tree, and we did. A couple weeks later, the city of Victoria comes by and tells us that, yeah, you can see where this is going. So, they have been not involved in this in the slightest, but it's gonna be $2,000. Not to the tree service is handling the tree, but we have to pay the city $2,000 to replant a comparable tree, either on our property or 2 trees, in which case it'd be even more money, elsewhere in the city. We contacted the city to say, first of all, ridiculous, and second of all, have you not considered what's going on? And maybe this is not the best time to go and ask us for $2,000 to plant a sapling somewhere on a park, which has probably got tents on it right now. And the response back, because it was me talking to them, was fairly measured, basically saying, we've never been less able to give people a break on this kind of thing. We cannot, because there's people who are deferring property taxes and all this kind of thing, desperately need the money. And the problem was that we were both right. I mean, we don't want to give them $2,000 right now because there are people in our building who are not working, and they don't want to have us not give them $2,000 because they also desperately need money. And it was, to me, it's just sort of a symptom of what's going on out there. Is eventually all these bills are going to start coming due, no matter how long we hit the snooze button on it. Eventually, somebody has to start, invoicing and collecting and paying, and it's going to be. And the longer it goes, the harder it's going to be.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. My 17-year-old, I have long talks about this because this crisis now is going to shape the way that she has to interact with government for the rest of her life. They'll be paying off the kind of debt that we're incurring right now, especially federally. And it's unfortunate that her generation is the one that's going to have to carry the ball for this, but it's kind of because the previous generation didn't put enough money away when times were good. It's a strange time. Hey, what do you think of the whole House of Commons thing this fear of sitting more than once with a small group of people a week. And this kind of weird sense, like I thought Rex had a good point in the National Post where he's like, why is the House of Commons less essential than the corner store?
I mean, Rex is right about that. We have lost the ability federally to sit back and say, if a liberal supporter, if Andrew Scheer says something, then you have to say it's wrong and terrible and awful, but also vice versa.
Oh, totally.
And that the liberals have a point where they say that the less we all gather, the better. Mm-hmm. And the House of Commons, by definition, involves people from all across the country commingling and potentially. So they're not wrong. However, I do not think it's healthy that there is absolutely no oversight going on. It's not clear how well virtual parliaments will work, although they're trying it out right now as we speak. Mm-hmm. And this would all be a lot easier to swallow had they not kind of bungled the tax law that I can't describe right now for some reason because Thank you. But also the one where they wanted to give themselves unlimited powers to tax for 22 months, and it was kind of like you can't explain that. Had they not had either an overreach or a badly communicated idea, one or the other, it would be a lot easier to say, yeah, you're right, we'll give you a pass for a few months. Yeah. Although all that said, it has been very odd to see regular business as usual question periods in Alberta, where it does not seem to be helping the a nonpartisan apolitical process. So it's a difficult balance to strike. I think there has to be some oversight. The fact that we haven't had any here, I think we've been more lucky than anything else that things seem to be going as well as they are. But were it not, how else are you supposed to raise concerns?
Yeah, one thing I would say is I think here the Liberals have calculated, well, this has overwhelmed all the NDP's crazy ideas on their usual agenda. So,
the
BC Liberals, they can't legislate anything into place anyways that, is their usual crazy, NDP policy. So I think they've done kind of the calculation there. You're right. Alberta is odd. Alberta's odd anyways. Like it's true. There's some strange politics there, and you have that opposition, which were all cabinet ministers until a year or two ago, and they know their files. Most of them knew their files better than their successors on the other side for the first few weeks. A little bit like the BC Liberals in the early days here. Yeah. But without NDPers in Alberta have this natural, like, opposition's their natural habitat, so they're used to it. BC Liberals didn't have that here in BC. Oh. I mean, like, when do you think we'll see the ledge really sit again? Like in BC, spring, maybe? Like,
yeah,
I'm unclear. Like, what do they have to do for no fault in order to get that all in place, or has that been passed?
Well, I think they're planning on having some sort of session in the fall, but what some sort of, I don't think they know yet. And fair enough.
Yeah. Totally.
As far as I mean, they have to come back in the spring at the very least, even just for some kind of budget. Yeah. But that can be done in a week. But I think they're planning on doing something in the fall, and I also think that the tolerance to let everything slide with zero oversight that's not indefinite.
Yeah.
And there will be some eventual, and maybe it is a virtual sitting, or maybe it's the 5 MLAs from each side. They did a pretty good job when they had to come back a couple weeks ago, and maybe it's just that. But eventually there will have to be something.
Yeah, no, I agree.
How's that for insight? Eventually,
eventually we will be governed again, people. Eventually, it will all happen again. Well, I mean, I think that's all I have.
It's me as well, and actually, the Premier is speaking in 9 minutes, so I should probably go into that as well. We'll see what he has to say. Although there's no announcement today. He's literally just taking questions.
There you go. Well, it's good for him to take questions, and he'll get. I'm sure it'll mainly be on reopening, and I do think that this idea of waiting to the beginning of May to then decide if you're going to reopen a couple weeks later, that may be too long a time frame given what's going on in the rest of the world. But we buck the trend from time to time, and maybe we will again.
We'll find out in 8 minutes. There you go, give or take. All right, until next time, I am Maclean K. That's Jordan Bateman. Find me at Maclean K, at Jordan Bateman, and find BC Poly Hot Stove on YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, and of course the mothership.
Have a good one, everyone.